Welcome back to Module 4. Module 4 is all about putting the budget into action and keeping it accountable. And here we're going to talk about the role of Parliament and civil society in the two latter stages of the budget process, namely the implementation or execution phase, which is phase 3, and then the audit and oversight phase, which is phase 4. Let's start by talking a little bit about the execution phase. And I just want to explain or point out here that if you look at the data that exists around Parliament's role in the budget cycle, the budget execution phase is probably the one in which Parliament is the weakest. And the reason for this is probably that a lot of the hype, as we said in the previous module, is around approval of the budget. Often what we see is that once the budget has been approved, the next discussion is after the fiscal year has taken place. So let's say you have a calendar year in your country and your budget year begins January 1st. So maybe your budget was approved by Parliament on December 15th. That whole next year, January 1st to December 31st, is the year which the budget will be executed. Often, there is no scrutiny being done on how the budget is being spent and whether funds are being spent for the purposes intended by Parliament as approved in the budget. And so what often happens is that there is no scrutiny until the audit oversight phase, until the Supreme Audit Institution comes in after the fiscal year is over. So this partly what we're saying here is that it's important to have in-year budget execution. And one of the examples we're going to provide, which has the gender lens to it, is the role of Parliament and the role of civil society in implementation phase when it comes to gender promises. So that is, there are certain promises that have been made in the budget and funds that have been allocated to supporting projects that have a gender tag. How do you know? How can you actually monitor to see whether those projects have been implemented or not? Can you check during the fiscal year to see whether those projects have been implemented or not? And that's something that we're going to have a really interesting conversation about as part of Module 4. The other issue that I think will be interesting for Module 4 is the supplementary budgets. Budget deviations will occur. Governments will introduce supplementary budgets often to adjust the original enacted budget. And this could be because of a revenue shortfall, it could be because of funding crises, or it could be for reallocations to address priority areas, as was the case in COVID-19 era. But Parliament needs to scrutinize these supplementary budgets in order to ensure that changes are justified, transparent, and that vulnerable population groups are having the impact on them minimized. So now let's have a look at the audit oversight phase. As you know, one of the things that we find in many African countries is that the British parliamentary system, the Westminster system, is elements of that system have been adapted throughout African parliaments. And as a result, we see a lot of public accounts committees, which are there to do a number of things. These are parliamentary committees that are there to review the financial statements at the end of the fiscal year. They're there to review the audited financial statements. That is, the financial statements that are reviewed by the audit office to ensure that the financial position of the government is being presented fairly and in compliance with international standards. But also to review value for money audit reports. That is, reports that look at whether government programs have been implemented with due regard to economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. And so the role of the Supreme Audit Institution, or the SAI, which is basically your Auditor General office, and Parliament, is very important. Unfortunately, what we find in other countries, including in Francophone Africa, where there is not necessarily a strong basis of cooperation between the Auditor General and Parliament, we often see that the oversight function ex post is relatively weak. So we're going to look at some of the best practices of public accounts committees and look at what civil society can do to work effectively with Parliament and with public accounts committees. We'll also look a little bit about how civil society can help shape audit agendas and participate in audit processes. AFRISAI, the African Regional Association of Supreme Audit Institutions, and CREFIAF, which is the French equivalent, have done a lot of work in this area to involve civil society to support audit offices across the continent in playing a more vigorous role in supporting or allowing civil society to be involved in the audit process. And so we'll hear a bit more about that as part of this module.